The Honorable Minister has reached the venue. May I now request one and all to kindly rise from your seat and welcome the Minister with a huge round of applause. Let him enter. Requesting all the students to maintain silence. Most respected Minister for External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar, Shri S. Somnath, Secretary DOS, President Governing Body of IIST, who is watching this program in an online mode, Dr. S. Unikrishnan Nair, Director, IIST, other dignitaries, faculty members, staff and students. A very warm welcome to the Amrit Kaal Vimarsh series at IIST. Dialogue is the fertile soil for democracy. Through dialogue, we inform, influence, become aware, and the nation transform. Today, we embark upon this development discourse to discuss the transformational changes that is to power our nation. IIST is privileged to have the brilliance of our esteemed External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, a mastermind in global diplomacy, a powerful communicator, and advocate of our nation's story. He embodies the very affinity to diverse culture in his capacity as External Affairs Minister. A trailblazer in bridging and synergizing global collectives with the needs of emerging India, Dr. Jaishankar competently leads India's prolific role as a free-thinking, collaborative, potent agent in international politics. Today, he has joined us in this august gathering to inform, inspire, and engage our students on the pressing issues on nation's development agenda. A very warm welcome to you, sir, to IIST. Shri S. Somnath, Secretary DOS, President Governing Body IIST, the unquestioned luminary of Indian space program, has led Team ISRO in perfect coherence to make history for our country with the perfect execution of Chandrayaan-3. We are honored to begin this program with a message from Shri S. Somnath, Secretary DOS, in video mode, who will be very graciously welcoming the esteemed minister and giving a brief profile of IIST. This will be followed by a video made by our students as a mark of their love and respect to the Honorable Minister.
We extend our heartfelt invitation to you, Shri S. Jaishankar, to join us for a special video presentation in honor of your remarkable contributions and accomplishments.
Good morning, all of you. Most Honorable Dr. S. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister, the Director of Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology, Dr. Unikrishnan Nair, the faculty and students of IIST, my greetings to you on the occasion of the visit of our Honorable Minister for External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar, to IIST. It's a momentous occasion for all of you in this institution. As all of you know, IIST has been established as a premier institution for bringing up the human capital in the domain of science and engineering to support the space program. When there was a real acute shortage of such availability of talented manpower in this domain. Today we know IIST, ever since its inception of the last 13 years, has done exceedingly well, which is on par with any IITs of this country, producing highly competent engineers and scientists to support the space program. And Indian Space Research Organization got benefited by the IIST in a big manner because we have almost 1,200 plus students now joined ISRO, and now they are part of the middle and lower management structure of the ISRO system, contributing very effectively for very prestigious programs that we are currently working on. And IIST has been established with the vision to create the link between the space organizations, laboratories across the country, to support the emerging space ecosystem in this nation, especially in the private and the non-governmental entities, and support research in collaboration with the world-renowned institutions of the world. I think all of these mandates, they are very well currently executing. Today, we have the most honorable Minister for External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar, amongst us, and we all know you, sir, as the voice of India while we speak about the complex geopolitical issues in the recent times, and your voice always stood out. That gave us so much of confidence and pride in what we think and what we act. And this voice is very, very important in the coming days to establish in the emerging Amrit Kaal to take India forward as a strong, powerful nation which will decide the destiny of the whole world. And today we know that through conducting the G20 meeting very effectively in New Delhi, recently concluded meeting, how efficient it was and how conclusive it was in terms of bringing out the final outcome of this meeting, creating such an agreement and working together behavior between many nations having conflicts of interest. I think this talks great about the diplomacy that we are displaying today, and it takes gives us so much of pride in you and your team in Ministry of External Affairs to drive this plan, as well as our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, to lead the activity of G20 in the last 1 year or so. So we are all eager to listen to you today when we talk about the G20 and the Vikasit Bharat theme, and all ears are of yours, for sir. And I'm very sorry that I couldn't be physically present, but I will definitely listen to your words for inspiration. And for all of us in IIST, it's a great day. Thank you so much for finding some time to visit IIST and to be with us. Thank you so much.
A wonderful tribute from one visionary to another. Let's take a quick glimpse into the life, thought and action of our Honorable External Affairs Minister.
You're asking the wrong minister when you say, how long will we do this? The world is not stupid. Please try to be a good neighbor.
This is Great Big Story.
My father was a bureaucrat. I have an elder brother who was a bureaucrat. My grandfather was a bureaucrat. My father, who was a very strong influence on us.
He was also equally active with the political life in JNU. He was a free thinker. He was one of the ideologues of the free thinkers, just like...
I don't think we're sitting on the fence. Just because I don't agree with you doesn't make me sitting on the fence. It means I'm sitting on my ground. I, Subramaniam Jaishankar, do swear in the name of God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of India. I would only say Bali was Bali and New Delhi is New Delhi. You know, somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems. But the world's problems are not Europe's problems. That if it is you, it's yours. If it is me, it's ours. I think that's something, and I see. I'm part of the East, I'm part of the South, I'm part of the West, I'm universal. I'm India.
That was a video made by the Photography Club. I thank Ms. Febna Rahim, Jnaneshwaran Aditya and Vinay. We begin the program by lighting the lamp and invoking the blessings of the Almighty. May I now request Director IIST to lead the Honorable Minister to the dais. I also request Dr. Kuduvilla Joseph, Registrar IIST, Dr. V. Narayanan, Director LPSC, Dr. Padma Kumar, Director IISU to kindly come to the stage and do the honor.
अखिल हृजेत्री मैत्री भजत अखिल हृजेत्री आत्मवदेव पराणपि पश्यत आत्मवदेव पराणति पश्यत युद्धं त्यजत स्पर्धां त्यजत युद्धं त्यजत स्पर्धां त्यजत त्यजत परेष्वक्रममाक्रमणं त्यजत परेष्वक्रममाक्रमणं मैत्रीं भजत अखिल हृजेत्री मैत्रीं भजत अखिल हृजेत्री.
That was Miss Annie, third year dual degree student, rendering Maitreem Bhajada, which is a calling to renounce war and cultivate friendship. As the first director of Human Space Flight Center, Bangalore, and leader and member in many of the nation's critical missions and teams on space exploration, our director, Dr. S. Unnikrishnan Nair, is a man in service to India's presence in space. May I now invite you, sir, to formally welcome the guests and the gathering.
Honorable Minister for External Affairs, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar sir, Shri S. Somnath, Secretary, Department of Space and Chairman, Governing Council of IIST, who is watching this program through online streaming, members of Honorable Ministers in Tourage, Director of LPSC and IISU, all faculty members, staff, students of IIST, all media persons, viewers through online, very, very good afternoon. It's a dream come true for us on this occasion, for all of us in IIST. We are all excited and feeling joy without bounds by the august presence of our Honorable Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar ji. Sir, incidentally, we are celebrating the crystal anniversary, or we have just completing 15 years of existence. And IIST has immensely contributed to the pool of technocrats in the country. As of now, 1,626 BTech degree graduates, they have passed out of this institution, and 104 dual degree students have got their degree, and 784 postgraduate students as well as 157 PhDs have been produced by this institute. Out of that, 1,316 graduates have got absorbed into ISRO, and as our chairman ISRO was saying, they have gone to the middle management level. And in this year, 2023, 98 of them have joined the ISRO. And we provide a very fertile environment for startups, and there are 5 startups incubated in IIST, and our vision is to be a world-class educational institution contributing significantly to the space endeavors, and that is what we are doing right now. We all know that our Honorable Minister is a well-known figure in diplomatic community. He is verily the voice of India in international arena. He has played a key role in the recently concluded G20 Delhi summit, where G20 New Delhi leaders' deliberation was unanimously got approved. Dr. Jaishankar was instrumental in getting back G20 to its original agenda of global growth and development. The short video has enumerated many of his achievements. I am not going to repeat. He is a recipient of Padma Shri in 2019 and has authored a widely acclaimed best-selling book, The India Way: Strategies for an Uncertain World, published in 2020. Dear all, we have today with us a visionary, outstanding leader, an author, a great orator, and a renowned statesman who is going to deliver a talk on G20 and Vikasit Bharat. Sir, we are all honored by your august presence, and in spite of nearly an hour-long journey from city, you have made it possible by coming down to, out of your love for the students of IIST, we cordially welcome you, sir, to this gathering. Here are people, students are here, and in another hall, they are all watching online, and this is being watched live through at many other places. I take this opportunity to welcome our chairman, who is joining through online, and directors of LPSC as well as ISU, all the deans, HODs, registrar, all faculty members, students, and media persons, and all those who watch through online. Jai Hind.
We have now very quickly progressed to the heart of the event, where we get to experience in person the elevated thoughts and perspectives of our Honorable External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. As a proficient communicator of India's nuanced stances on complex global issues, Dr. Jaishankar's speeches, quotes, and views have captured the nation's youth by storm. He has today almost 2.5 million followers in social media. Dr. Jaishankar has proved himself as the best cool-headed and strategic diplomat to champion India's interests, earning him the popular adjective as the nimble-footed, agile diplomat par excellence. As a Foreign Secretary and now the External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar has made a dynamic composite of his bureaucratic and political experience. Harnessing the power of collectives to the nation's growth engine, the most recent being the G20 summit, the prolific record of our Honorable Minister continues as dynamic as ever. May I now take the privilege of inviting the Honorable Minister to share with us his vision on G20 summit, Vikasit Bharat, and to infuse us with that spirit that is a perfect blend of strong patriotism and responsible global citizenship.
Dr. S. Somnath, virtually, Dr. Unikrishna Nair, Dr. Joseph Kurvilla, colleagues, friends. First of all, let me say it's really, for me, a wonderful opportunity, experience to be with all of you, and especially to be with all of you on what I understand is your crystal anniversary. So my best wishes. I'm very confident that you all have a fantastic future ahead. The little that I've seen before coming to this meeting actually has only given me a stronger belief in what all of you are capable of, and I wish you all the very best. Now, I am supposed to speak to you about G20 and the Vikasit Bharat. What I would like to do, since some of you have tracked me in a way, is I'd like to share some thoughts, and then quite honestly I would much rather have a conversation with all of you, so that I also have something to take away when I leave. So if you will indulge me, that's the approach I would go. So let me actually, before I begin to G20, speak about another event which took place just a few days before that. And it was an event which all of us know as the date of the Chandrayaan landing. And at that time, along with the Prime Minister, I was at the BRICS summit in South Africa. Now, when we arrived at the BRICS summit the first day, this is a gathering of the leaders of India, China, Russia, South Africa, Brazil, but they had invited another 50, 60 presidents and prime ministers. So it really looked like half the world was there, half the world leadership was there. Now, it often happens in such gatherings, people know each other, they start talking to each other. And very quickly, you could see that the Chandrayaan excitement, this was the day before the landing, had started to seep through osmosis from us onto everybody else. So by the time we hit that evening, there was a kind of leaders' retreat. In fact, it was not just we who were talking Chandrayaan, even the others had started talking Chandrayaan. The next day was the main meeting, and you all know, at a certain point of time, Prime Minister kind of we are told, the host saying, look, we need time off, we have something more important to look at this time. And I cannot tell you really the impact that it made on all of them. And that impact was so deep. That evening, these events, there's a dinner. So here's this big, long head table. Think there are about, 65, 70 presidents and prime ministers out there. All of Africa, a large part of Latin America, Asia. And the welcoming speech of the South African president, most of it was actually about Chandrayaan. And the feeling in the room was, look, you Indians have to understand what it is you have achieved today. You have actually told the rest of the world of what you are capable, and therefore given us a feeling that we too are capable. That in fact, he actually joked, he said, President Ramaphosa, if I go and sit next to Prime Minister Modi, some of it will rub off onto me also. So now what happened was, the moment, of course, the praises started coming, everybody wanted to stand up. So you actually the Prime Minister had to walk the entire length of the table both ways. He was seated at the center. And every person in that, every president and every Prime Minister wanted to shake his hand. And I can tell you, it was a genuine feeling. It was, when it's, I mean, I've been, long enough in life to know when it's real and when it's not. And I can tell you, that sense you had from everybody else was so overwhelming. And of course, from there we went to Greece, and then we flew the night. And as Dr. Somnath will tell you, we landed up early morning in Bengaluru along with the Prime Minister for him to come and congratulate the Chandrayaan team in person. Now, that sense, I must tell you, also carried into the G20. That when we met at the G20, yes, the G20, the G20 is like, you could say, it's like a mission that we also launch. Huh? So you prepare for a mission for a long time, you do trial runs, you experiment in the lab, you do real life simulation. So everything that you do, think of us as doing something like this. For us, it's like a mission G20, So that day for us was like a G20 landing. So but when we approached that in the last 2 days, again you could see, how much of the conversation, remarks by, it would somewhere be a joke, it would be a remark of admiration, it would be, but today that has so deeply imprinted itself in the mind of the world that no question, what was done was a fantastic space achievement, technology achievement, but it is actually in many ways the ripple impact of this, I must tell you, in global consciousness is enormous. And that is something which your fraternity really should appreciate, and you should actually, in a sense, have that inner satisfaction, which you will, of course, be too disciplined and modest to express outwardly. So that is the first thought which was, when I felt I was coming here, I felt that feeling which I experienced in BRICS and in the G20 is something that I need to share with you all. Now, the second thought was a program which actually I did this morning. This morning, today is September 17th. It is Vishwakarma Day. It is a day when we recognize and honor people who over centuries have kept up the tradition of arts and craft alive in this country. But think of it this way. It is these people who, by keeping arts and craft alive, who actually kept knowledge alive, who have kept our confidence alive, who have kept our culture alive. That what they did, and often these are people who, are facing enormous economic hardships. Many of them have learned through, apprenticeship at home, often under very challenging economic circumstances. But I mention this for two reasons. One, because when the Prime Minister today addressed, we launched a scheme today called the PM Vishwakarma scheme, by which we would actually give support to all artisans in 18 professions, support for modernizing their tools, but give them access to credit and then access to modern markets and help them with their brand promotion, so that this tradition, which we have nurtured for thousands of years, carries on. Now, in the course of that, Prime Minister Modi actually addressed, we were dispersed in 71 destinations across the country, and he summed up, I would say, the core focus of this country today in two words: technology and tradition. That how do we advance on both? How do we move forward in one without losing the other, which has happened in many societies? How, in fact, do you use one to support the other? The technology can support tradition, and tradition can support technology. And those words were still kind of resonating with me when I came here. Now, when I look at the G20, because that is the starting point of my subject today, a lot of what we discussed in G20, in one way or the other, goes to tradition and technology. That the G20, this G20, under India's presidency, actually met in very, very, I would say, in strong stress conditions. That if you look at the world today, the world has been passing through a very difficult phase. For more than a decade, we've actually had a practice of globalization, where many societies found that they could not compete, that their manufacturing, their production of goods actually was hollowed out, that they were importing from faraway destinations. There were economies which were reduced to producing natural resources for others. And the terms of economic engagement for them were very, very uneven, very unfair. And so you already from, I would say, the first decade of this century, we actually already had a growing economic, I would say, economic social challenge which was building in the international economy. Now, thereafter came this once in a century pandemic. And the devastation that this pandemic has caused across the world is actually unbelievable. Now, I'm sure that there's not a single person in this room, probably a single person in the world, who's not had a direct experience with the pandemic. Many of us have had COVID, many of us know people who had it. Almost all of us would have lost somebody close to us, part of our family. But there are societies which have managed to recover. We are one of them. I must tell you, there are many societies which have not recovered. That when you travel around the world, those who did not have the same resilience, those whose economic management was less effective, those who did not have health access, those who did not have vaccines, those who had vaccines but could not vaccinate. Now, you had a series of challenges which the world went through. Again, our economy bounced back. Believe me, that is not the norm. There is a large part of the world whose economy has not bounced back. So you had really about a decade plus of very tough economic conditions, and then you have this overlay of this once in a century, burden on this. And then came the Ukraine conflict. And the Ukraine conflict, triggered off because we live in a globalized world. We all source supplies from different parts of the world. It created an energy crisis. It created a food crisis. It created a fertilizer crisis. It created inflation across the world. Now, these were the circumstances in which actually we took over the G20 presidency. So, look at the challenge now before us. On the one hand, you have a once in 20 years, because G20 means you get a presidency rotationally every 20 years. You have a 1 in 20 year opportunity as the presidency of the G20 to help set directions. Because it's unanimous, it's a gathering. But the presidency, whoever occupies the chair obviously has a lot of say. So on the one hand, we are trying to set the long-term directions for where we think the world should be going. At the same time, there is the immediate. these challenges that I've laid before you, the inflation from the conflict, the very differentiated access which came from the pandemic, the underlying problems which are today facing the world. And in all of this, you have mega trends which have actually been almost unstoppable. I mean, if you look at climate events, climate catastrophes, in fact, their intensity, their scale, their frequency has all been growing steadily. So here you are trying to do the immediate, looking at the medium term, trying to set a much more long-term direction for where the world would go. And this is driven by two big contradictions: the polarization caused between the East and the West over the Ukraine conflict, and this very bitter divide between the North and the South. Because, I cannot tell you how angry many societies are about how they were treated during COVID. That there are countries who could not access vaccine, even though very close to them, where other countries who were producing vaccines and in many cases had a storage of vaccines which were 5x, 6x the population of the country. So when the inequities and the injustice of that still rankles with a lot of the world. So this is really was the challenge that we faced at the G20. Now, what we tried to do at the G20, I mean, one part of it is, the bit which you all read about in the newspaper or you saw on your phones or on your television sets or in the social media was, yes, okay, the Indian diplomacy got it together, they were able to come up with a statement, so that's great. But that's only a very small part of the story. The real, I would say, achievement was to get the world, the top 20 countries of the world, once again thinking about the right issues. So think of the G20 as now a mission that is straight from its course. So you have to now change its trajectory. You have to bring it back on path. You have to give that mission the right messages and the right signals so that it does what it is supposed to do. And the mission of the G20 was how to nurture and take forward global growth and global development and not get sidetracked, not focus on issues which is not central to this. I mean, which is not to say that those issues are not important, they are. But like any mission, a mission must stay on target. And how to get this mission back on target, I think, was for us a very, very big challenge. So what do I mean by that? I think if I were to spell out some of the key outcomes of the G20, the key outcomes of the G20 for me, first of all, was an acceptance by the top 20 countries of the world that the other 125, 30 countries of the world are no longer able to meet their education, their health, their nutrition, their infrastructure, their social targets. That something different has to be done if the world is not to falter in its pursuit of sustainable development goals by 2030. And that something requires resources on a massive scale, on a different scale. It requires the application of those resources in a purposeful and effective manner. It requires a refocusing on programs which in the last few years, for a variety of reasons which I have spelled out, that it has moved away from them. The second was, once you say, okay, this is the goal, and there's a second goal, and the second goal is to address climate. Because for years now, every year, there's a conference called COP. It's a conference of parties on climate change. Now, I sometimes joke, there's this movie called Groundhog Day, where every day is the same day, it's a repetitive day. So these conferences sometimes are like Groundhog Day. Every conference concludes, and the next conference will kind of go through this again. So the real issue there is lack of resources, that the developed countries promised resources, they have not delivered on it, and the state of the global environment is getting worse with each passing year. We can all see it. I mean, you people, most of all, can judge it and evaluate it. How do you today deal with that? So one of the outcomes again of the G20 was the idea that we should have a Green Development Pact, which is somewhere we have to find some way of raising resources and addressing, to tell a developing country that, you must give up coal or you must move away from fossil. It's a great advice. Now you have to enable them to go down renewables. You have to give them the other options which they can afford and execute. So those, in a sense, were the kind of big goals which the G20 refocused on. And there were a variety of I would say, downstream issues which came up. One of which, of course, was what are the best ways of doing this? And here again, India had a singular contribution to make. That in the last 5 years, I would say especially last 2-3 years, there's a huge global interest in the digital public infrastructure of India. How are we delivering using the digital medium? How are we using the digital backbone? That this perception, 20 plus years ago, when Y2K scare was on the horizon, we actually got this image of being the term Indian techie got invented at that time. Today, there's an enormous upgrade of that. People don't think you are at the back office anymore. Actually, people think you are in the front lines of what is happening. And nothing illustrates that more than what is happening in terms of digital delivery. And the COVID itself was an example of that. That even when we discuss it, sometimes we are very proud of the fact that we managed to make large amounts of Make in India vaccines. We even produced invented in India vaccine. But we should also look at the platform that we created, a platform which actually enabled us to vaccinate 1.4 billion people. Because there were many developed countries who had the vaccines, who struggled with actually execution of the vaccination. So the impact that we are today making in terms of our digital delivery, that too was a very big part of the discussion at the G20. Now, there were a few other issues, and I think two of them at least would interest you. One is the whole domain of global skills, global workplace, mapping skills. And it was the first time the G20 actually focused on it at any great length. And it focused on it because today, when we speak about the knowledge economy, when we speak about technology, we also must appreciate there's an enormous mismatch between technology demand and demographic supply. That where there is often activity or demands, it's that's not really where the capacities are. And this is something which is absolutely crucial for us in India to appreciate, and I say this very consciously at an education institution, that the rest of the world, not all of the world, but much of the world today, is actually going through an HR crisis. That there are ambitions that they have. I mean, if you look, for example, in the United States, there's a huge investment today in the entire semiconductor domain, because everybody believes, chips is the new oil, new gold, new whatever you can call it. So the chips war, this is supposed to be the new competition. But what does that require? It also requires just having the technology and the investment and even the infrastructure is sometimes not enough. That they need the accompanying resources, the human resources to go with that. So I think there was for the first time a recognition today that there is a fundamental imbalance in the world, and this imbalance would only be created if actually there is a greater pooling of technology, which means greater technology mobility. Greater mobility for people who have the technology skills and talent. And in fact, Prime Minister himself suggested that, maybe the G20 should even look at the possibility of a technology visa. That if the world economy today will require people to travel much more efficiently in order to service a different kind of economy, then the regulatory systems cannot lag behind. The other, of course, is that there was a lot of discussion about women-led development, because I think there's a lot of interest today that there's a recognition today that the gender gaps, the gender imbalances actually are one of the key factors which are holding back many countries. Now, that in a way, there are other things which happened in the G20, but from your perspective, what I would like you to understand is there was actually a very serious deliberation, not at one meeting. The summit meeting was coming at the end of about 200 odd meetings which different streams did and which fed into a larger consideration. That the G20 actually deliberated really on the future of the planet, on the well-being of humanity, because if you look at the kind of issues, sustainability of planet, or issues like resourcing, development, social well-being, I think there's also a recognition that you can't have a situation where some parts of the world continue to progress and other parts of the world stagnate or even deteriorate. I think that recognition was also there. But most of all, I think there was an understanding in the G20 that the world is moving to a different era. This is an era of technology. The countries who are or have prepared or willing to prepare their HR to meet these skills, these are the countries who will make a difference in the future. Secondly, that in all of this, the countries who will be able to work with others, increasingly, because when you have this kind of imbalance, then partnerships become very important. So do appreciate today that if the world is today more open to us, there are two reasons for it. One, because the world is more respectful to us, but also because in some respects, the world needs us in certain areas. So there is a utility for it as well, other than admiration. And how do we really prepare for an era of the knowledge economy? I think that is really, in a sense, what the G20 was taking us towards. Now, having said that, let me, come specifically to the domain which all of you occupy and, work in. Which is that of space. A lot of us who spent our time in foreign policy, we have been long-term partners of our space programs, our space missions, in different ways. I myself, for example, started my career in Moscow, those days Soviet Union. At that time, USSR was one of our key space partners. I then moved on to the US, again, often switching back and forth between dealing with one country and dealing with the other. And I mention this to you because for many, many years, we were at the receiving end of the suspicions and the pressures of the rest of the world. So I've spoken about technology, I've spoken about tradition. I must also say we were often the target. There was a third T as well. And for me, it is outgrowing the third T, which is today when we speak about Vikasit Bharat, when we speak about how we are today able to shape the global agenda, influence at least the global agenda. If there is a demand for our skills, our technology, our partnerships, if others want to work with you collaboratively, then you must also understand what a long journey we have made. That we certainly, my generation went through for us this whole export controls, technology denials. This was really the India which we pushed through for multiple decades. And for those who today have arrived on the scene, it's very hard for me to communicate what we had to put up with, what we had to absorb during that period. What people did in different ways, what the technology people did, what the diplomatic people did, what the political people did. How did we do the capacity building, the workarounds, the collaborations, the building of our strengths, which has brought us to where we are. This, because it's very important that we should not take our capability today as something which was, which was God-given, which we arrived at miraculously. It has really taken the efforts of generations of people to bring us to where we are. And I say this not so much that, it's important to look back. I say this because it is also a testament today of our influence in the world. If a country, some years ago, there are in the world a series of export control regimes. Okay, there's one for nuclear called the Nuclear Supplies Group. There's one for missile technology called the Missile Technology Control Regime. There's one for chemicals, which is called Australia Group. There's one for conventional weapons called Wassenaar. We were for decades the targets of these groups. Today, barring Nuclear Supplies Group, and that is also because of the objection of a few countries, we are today not just a member of the other groups. In fact, in many cases right now, it is India which is chairing Wassenaar. And we certainly today are a very respected member of the Missile Technology Control Regime. So this journey that we have made, this is also part of the development of India. Now, when just recently the Prime Minister, as you would have noted, went to the United States. If we looked at the outcomes of the visit, again, it's interesting how much technology features in that. I mean, among the key outcomes, one was a whole set of space-related outcomes, which is, they were keen that, from a time when people actively targeted us, today countries are keen that we join arrangements. So we were actually invited to join the Artemis Accords, working with other countries on a space flight. So there were a set of space-related accords. There were a set of semiconductor-related accords. There were important technology providers in different fields who were keen to work with India because, again, it is only, when countries like India become mainstream players in that you will actually get overall balance in semiconductor production in the world. So the journey that we have come and the value that we bring to the table is something which all of you must recognize, because it is that confidence, it is building on these achievements which will really take us forward. What I do want to say is, I'm giving you, in a sense, a certain outcome and describing a certain part of a journey in diplomacy, a journey in negotiation, a journey in technology control, overcoming that. But finally, all these are possible only if the foundations get more and more solid. And the foundations will get more and more solid when we do build the deep strengths, when we do the socio-economic reforms and progress that we need to do at home. In that respect, nobody will help us. Nobody can help us. That the changes which we have to do, which we have been doing, especially over the last decade. And, you know, when it comes to a society of the scale of India, it is not that you attack one problem. You have to attack 25 problems at different levels of a timeline and complexity, all at the same time, because somewhere each one of them will impact the other, often in a very, very positive way. So if we, for example, improve nutrition, reduce maternal mortality, actually provide electricity and water to homes, and improve school education, enhance school retention, do your skills and startups, I guarantee you the percentage of women coming to work will be very much higher. Because each one of this will feed into that. That when, you know, many of you would often read about schemes of various kinds. You know, so often the schemes are not understood to be part of a larger mosaic. That if nutrition levels improve, if the school-going habits improve, the human, you know, resources immediately, even something like home ownership, that the psychological and social consequences of home ownership are tremendous. So how do we today, one part of it is to improve our basic human development indices. The other part of it is to bring about a change in thinking, which is why the concept of skilling, the concept of innovation, the concept of startups, the idea that, you know, I've come here for the first time, so I don't know what you were like 5 years or 10 years ago. But I'm pretty sure what you showed me around your labs would not have been there 5 years ago. And I see this not, I mean, you are a very specialized institution. If I go today to, you know, to any engineering college anywhere in the country, I see a different mindset today. You know, in my era, people valued you for the grades or the marks that you got. Today, you actually introduce to young people saying, you know, they have a patent, or they have a startup, or they've done this innovation. So how do we actually bring that change of mindset around? Because that is really necessary for the creation of the kind of deep strengths that I'm talking about. But deep strengths also mean, in a way, that there has to be some kind of, I would say, collective commitment. Because we cannot, you know, often people speak about a China or a Japan or a Korea. I have lived in China and Japan. I have seen really how much they do to support their own systems. That big companies will nurture smaller companies who will nurture even smaller companies. That they will look, where possible, they will look for solutions. They will support their own institutions and their own practices. So this is not chauvinism. It is actually a very sensible technology strategy. A strategy by which, you know, if we end up, a country like ours cannot end up as an integrator. And being an integrator in a volatile world is actually dangerous, because at any time you are held hostage by suppliers of various kinds. So again, when we speak about Atmanirbhar Bharat, the whole idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat is that the vital segments of the economy, vital segments of technology, the supply chain as far as possible must either be with us, or we must be part of it in some way, or we must have a partnership with it in some way, so that there is an assurance about it. So you can see, you know, today, for someone in diplomacy, how critical, if you were asked to ask me today, okay, what are the issues which are right on top of your priority? For me today, critical and emerging technologies, that the amount of time and effort we put into it. Critical minerals today is an increasing issue. How do we today build up getting into reliable and resilient supply chains, becoming part of it ourselves? Because if you are part of a supply chain, the possibility that you will get good treatment for the parts you are not in is that much higher. So it is increasingly a world of greater technology. It is a world also, I would say, of greater knowledge in that sense. It is a world, most of all, of artificial intelligence. So every one of us, I think you all know better than me, each one of us is a constant emitter of electronic data, and the kind of the repercussions that will have in our lives will be tremendous. The world 5 years from now, somebody in my place 5 years from now will be coming and giving you a very, very different talk, because that is the pace of change that we are looking at today. So how much of that, yes, I often the spirit of nationalism, it's a very legitimate spirit, it's a great motivating spirit. You need that kind of, I would say, intangible drive to make each one of us excel and put in much more than we would humanly be willing to do if we are very cool and rational about it. But it is also something, I would say, today there is a power element on it, there is a security element on it, that how do we today build that kind of capacities over the next 25 years. So when Prime Minister speaks about Amrit Kaal, there is a reason why he's put a 25-year time frame. He doesn't want short-term thinking, because in a democracy, in an electoral system, it's natural. People say, okay, my term is what, 5 years? A country like ours cannot have a 5-year frame for its thinking. It must think at least a generation. It must think a generation. A lot of what we hope and expect is that some of the fires that we have lit over the last 10 years, they will catch on. I can already see that the spirit of the society, especially the spirit of the young people, is far more confident today. And the kind of stellar achievements like the Chandrayaan mission, they also strengthen that, that there is, beyond the immediate domain, there is that sense in the country that yes, we are capable of very difficult and complex challenges, that we can meet those challenges. So the whole outlook, really, I would say almost the strategy for a Vikasit Bharat, it is based on this, that today we are thinking 25 years, we're preparing 25 years. A lot of what, as I said, you hear every day in your lives, skill, startup, even, I would say, even Khelo India, even Fit India. The purpose is to make you more competitive. If you are physically more competitive, you are mentally more competitive. So every part of it is one part of a mosaic. That mosaic is intended really today to prepare us for a 25-year period ahead. That 25-year period will be led by the technology leaders of our country. That there will be certain institutions, certain professions, certain callings, certain people who will in any collective will stand out. That their achievements will be a motivation for the rest of us. So that is in many ways the message which I wanted to share with you today. I really thank you on a Sunday to have taken the trouble and come. I can only say that, for me, a visit like this is something which is enormously validating, that I am by nature a very optimistic person. I think you would have seen that.
But even optimists need validation of their beliefs. And for me, every visit like this is one such occasion. Once again, thank you very much.
Sir, on behalf of the entire IISc community, I thank you for sharing your creative mind space with us, giving us clear direction about the landmark initiative of G20 Summit and also sharing your vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Before the surge from this wonderful speech settled down, let us move on with full zest to the next important part, the dialogue, which is the heart of the program. The floor is now open for dialogue and discussion. I invite the members of the IISc community to share your thoughts and questions with the Honorable Minister. I also request Dr. Aravind, Professor, Department of Aerospace Engineering, to coordinate this interactive session.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you, sir, for this very wonderful and insightful thoughts that you have shared with us. So we'll be opening up the floor. Before that, I will just start the questions myself. Two questions from my side, maybe the thought process. One is, how can we have space education as an international diplomacy? Because now, as you mentioned, because of the Chandrayaan, it is a lot of buzz happening all around the world. So can we move along with spacefaring as well as non-spacefaring nations, bring them along with the umbrella of space education, bring them to, their students can do some satellites. So the impact on that particular aspect. Second is, you rightly pointed out on the startups. So the space tech startup is a deep tech startup. And what I understand, I am one of the mentors of the startup. The expertise available in IIST is quite vast as compared to that outside. So if we can have a consortium of space startups in the country, which can be led by IIST, it will accelerate the growth of space startups in the country, as well as it will produce entrepreneurs like Elon Musk in 5 to 10 years' time. Yeah, thanks.
I take the second as a suggestion, but on the first, the analogy I can give you is actually to digital. That 20 years ago, we did not fully understand how all pervasive digital would become. That there is nothing you would do. I mean, when you open your fridge to put on your washing machine, to driving your car, I mean, every part today of our existence in some form or the other is actually becoming influenced by digital. Now, I can see not so far away a period when actually space will emerge as a much more pervasive factor in calculations. That when we still think of space applications, and I'm sure we people are at the receiving end of your wisdom, but we tend to be very much guided by the experiences of the past. Whereas I think where it could head, and for me in diplomacy, we are already talking amongst ourselves that we will need a set of people who will actually know much more, who will become, to some degree in nuclear we did that. We produced over many, many years people who are deeply conversant with the nuclear domain because the circumstances required us to do that. But the space challenge is very different because first of all, it's physically a completely different domain. The potential of it is very much more. So I see a completely sort of new stream out here, a cross-cutting stream. And I do think it's something which all of us will have to reflect on.
The Honorable Minister will take 3 questions at a time, requesting all to make the question short and sharp.
Yeah, now the floor is open to questions, students. Yeah.
Good evening, sir. My name is Krish Garg. I am a student of BTech third year aerospace program. Good evening, sir. My name is Krish Garg. I am a student of BTech third year aerospace program. I wanted to ask you that you have had experience as an ambassador in various countries of high importance such as China and the United States. So how does that experience help you now as serving as the External Affairs Minister of the country? And do you see other people working in other departments also joining politics soon? Thank you.
Sir, one question. I'm Narayanan, Director of Liquid Propulsion System Center. Anyhow, today the stature of the country is great in all fields. And what is your comment about getting permanent membership in UN?
Good evening, sir. I'm Komal Gaikwad, integrated PhD student from Avionics department. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for the success of G20. And so my question is, as we could see, India's domestic policy for growth, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, is been echoed and practiced during India's G20 presidency. Could you please share the challenges faced and significance of integrating African Union in G20 and its impact in the global image of Bharat in the vision of inclusive development? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start with the first question. So I'm in a relatively unusual position of someone who's, you can say, started at the bottom of the business. You work your way up. You've done all the things which you do at various points of time. And what it does is it gives you an enormous advantage that you pretty much know how different layers work, because a lot of it is something you've done yourself. But then there is a management issue which always comes, and anybody who's senior in management will know, which is every time you go up the management, how do you let go of the previous positions and responsibilities that you've held? Because a good manager is great if they're not a micromanager. They must know but not always seek to control. So it's actually, one of my colleagues described it as a zooming in, zooming out capability. That you zoom in when there's a crisis, but you zoom out when your wisdom is no longer required at that point of time. So it's, I would say, certainly for me, it's enormously helpful also that over a period of time, say for example during G20, that the relationships that you've built up with people also come into play. Because in any business, I mean, if you look at space, for example, every space agency, there will be a certain set of people who will know their peers in that agency of the other country. So those are also helpful. Your issue of whether, do I expect others to follow suit? Look, I myself was a very improbable candidate. I mean, I'll be very honest with you. It was not something I ever expected or planned. I would only say this, that the way, given the state in which our country is proceeding today, it's very important that good, professional, sensible, conscientious citizens take more interest in the direction in which the nation is going. You don't have to necessarily do that by joining politics. There are many other ways. After all, in a democracy, every few years, you actually get to have a contribution by going to the polls. But it's important that, the citizens of a country don't think the government and policy is for somebody else to do. You're all equal stakeholders in that. It's your future, after all. So I am really hoping that if people who have built up capabilities in different fields, when they feel that, okay, I've done my bit in that particular field, or I can take on an added responsibility, if they also feel like contributing to politics, I think politics of this country would be much better for it. The permanent membership question, it's, I think very injudiciously, I often say injudicious things, described it like a passenger in a bus. The person sitting on the seat will not vacate it for the next person. So there are these 5 guys sitting on the seat. So whoever comes, so sometimes you'll see such passengers, somebody is very tired, somebody is carrying a baby, but they'll not get up and give that seat. So we have to, there has to be pressure. That I am seeing actually over the last few years, that a large part of the world today feels this is something which needs to be done. There are 54 countries in Africa. They don't have a single member. There's not a single Latin America member. I mean, the most populous country in the world is not there. The 5th largest economy of the world is not there. So how long would you continue that? So what would happen if they do not reform? People will find solutions outside. And this is a message that the UN has to understand. That their resistance to reform will eventually, it's a bit like survival of the fittest. They will become anachronistic and therefore develop the danger of heading towards not extinction but a little bit of irrelevance. So I hope that pressure really grows. I can see that is growing. On the African Union question, it was one issue where the Prime Minister himself personally kind of stuck his neck out. Okay, he took the lead because for many years we would hear every year, I must tell you, often in diplomacy, the general tendency is to play for a draw and sort of, a mixed metaphor, but kick the ball, kick the can down the road and say, okay, next year we'll see. That's often a kind of a default attitude. So for many years we've been going through this. People, Africans would raise it and people say, yes, very good idea, we must do something. When we became president, he was very clear saying, look, enough of this, we will do something, I will take the lead. And which is what he did. I mean, he wrote to the other 19 leaders saying, this is India's firm view, please let me know, where you stand. And I think it forced the issue, which was very good. But why did we do it? I think that's a very good question you have raised, because eventually, look within our own country. In our own country, there is the ethical part of it. I don't, I'm very much for it. We all want to see social justice. But there is a utilitarian part of it also. Country is not well served if parts of the country are left behind. If, certain communities or a certain gender or a certain region doesn't, keep up with the rest of the country. Now the same logic applies to the world. So if we are today trying to build a more socially just country within India, after all, should we not have a socially just international order? And, look at the kind of suffering which Africa has gone through. I mean, they need an extra support. They need a helping hand. They need carve-outs in many, many areas. So that's the kind of thinking, it's this leave no one behind thinking, which is really what motivated us to push for it so strongly.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Jatin. I passed out from this college last year, and currently I'm working as a scientist in LPSC Vallamala. So, sir, my question is, basically, as a diplomat being for so long, could you please share the methodology which a diplomat opts when an international crisis like Ukraine-Russian war is there, or issues near the border comes? Basically, the methodology as a diplomat.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Sajid Momin. I'm a master's student in the Department of Aerospace. My question to you is that how does India ensure the security of space assets under the evolving national security threats, and how does the role of diplomacy plays role in this context?
Hello, sir. Good evening. I am Shanchari. I am pursuing my PhD here. So my question is, yes, sir. My question is regarding that cultural corridor, as art and culture speaks the unspoken. So while choosing those particular artifacts that were displayed there in that cultural corridor, some strategic and diplomatic aspects were kept in mind. If so, can you explain with an example?
The first question, the methodology. You know, the methodology depends on the nature of the mission. If I'm in a situation where I myself have direct stakes, you have follow a different methodology. If I am looking at a different situation where the primary parties are others, and I am trying to extract something from it or limit some damage, you will follow a different methodology. But by and large, if there are some broad universal principles, one of them is in any, and I give you a G20 as an example. Wherever possible, try and center yourself. Center yourself so that to the extent that you, if you can, even if you have stakes, if you become the judge, arbitrator rather than the litigant, that you are not the person with the grievance or the demand, but you position yourself saying, okay, oh, the other one which we call, help me to help you. I have really tough colleagues here, so give me something so that I can convince them. So there are, I would say, certain practices which all negotiators evolve over a period of time. And you can kind of call it like a negotiator's mantra. And depending on the situation, they would apply the one in question. On the space assets, it is, it's an issue, but for which right now nobody would have a definitive resolution, which is that because it is a new domain, there are limits to the agreements among countries, because whenever there is a new domain, it takes a little while for countries with capabilities to arrive at an understanding. And definitely in the case of space, I think that is something which is very much still under discussion. On the cultural corridor, and the question relates that at the G20, there was this big space where there were cultural exhibits of different countries which were displayed. What we did was we asked all the G20 countries and the guest countries, saying, send us something which you believe is a statement about your culture and heritage. It was very interesting, the choices itself told you something. What they sent also told you something. So the pick was actually not done by us. We gave everybody an open invitation saying, tell us what is the brand statement you want to make. Yeah. But I must also share with you that we ourselves made a brand statement that at that time at the National Gallery of Modern Art, we had organized an exhibition on Indian heritage and culture, and I think it had a very powerful impact on all the people who went and saw it.
Okay, so we are done with the interactive session. Thank you, sir, for your valuable insights once again. Thank you.
Due to time constraint, I regret to inform you that we have to wind up this interactive session here. Thank you, sir, for sharing your insights and vision. As a mark of our love and gratitude, may I now request Director IISc to hand over few mementos to the Honorable Minister. The mementos include the model of ISRO's 3 workforce, the SSLV, the PSLV, LVM-3, the idol of Lord Padmanabhan, and a T-shirt being gifted by Team Consentia. Just go for it. The depth and range of ideas we could cover and gather today are accelerating, something each of us might be grateful for. To give voice to that sense of gratitude, I invite Dr. Kuruvilla Joseph, Registrar IISc, to propose the vote of thanks.
Most respected Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar Ji, Sri S. Somanath, Secretary DOS, President Governing Body IIST, Dr. S. Unnikrishnan Nair, Director IIST, other dignitaries, faculty members, staff, and my dear students. I stand here at the conclusion of a very important program to extend our deepest appreciation to the Honorable Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar, for gracing IIST with his esteemed presence. I am sure his visit and address have left an indelible mark on our institution and the hearts of all those who had the privilege of listening to him. Dr. Jaishankar's profound insights into the future of our nation, international affairs, and diplomacy were enlightening. The wisdom he has shared during his speech will positively go on to enrich the potential of our young scholars for years to come. Sir, IIST look forward to continuing our engagement with you and your vision for a brighter and more connected world. On behalf of the present government body, Secretary DOS, Director, faculty members, staff and students, I extend our sincere gratitude to you, sir, for your invaluable presence and inspirational words. Your visit will forever resonate in our hearts and minds. I also thank Sri S. Somanath, Secretary DOS, President Governing Body of IIST, for his involved leadership. Dr. S. Unnikrishnan Nair, Director IIST, for his insightful guidance. Dr. V. Narayanan, Director LPSC, Dr. Padma Kumar, Director IASU, and all officials, scientists from VSSC, LPSC, IASU, invitees, deans, faculty members, staff, and the students for their valuable presence and engagement in this process. I also extend my sincere appreciation to the media for the active coverage for the program and to all those in IIST who have tirelessly worked behind the scene to make this program a huge success. Let us continue to remember, reflect, discuss, and grow together. And in that, may our nation development thrive. Thank you. Jai Hind.
A group photo session is arranged in the amphitheatre, requesting the dignitaries to stay back. The others very quickly move to the amphitheatre and assemble themselves for the group photo. Because of the lack of time, others have to very quickly move out.
All of you, please move up quickly. We can have the group photo. Please move out.